around 28 or 30 or so AD, Jesus made a prophecy in Mark chapter 13 that nothing that where they were at the temple, and everybody was so impressed at all the stones of the temple, Jesus said, not one stone will be left on the other. He made that prophecy, 28, 30-ish or so AD. And nobody really thought a lot about it other than he had prophesied that. Well, many years later, in 66 AD, there was a Jewish revolt against the Roman government. And there was a leader, a commander of one of the detachments in Galilee by the name of Josephus. And the Romans came in, led by Vespasian, the general, and his son, Titus, who was also a military leader. And they came in, and they pretty easily conquered Galilee. And they're lining people up to kill the opposing army's leadership. That's the way it works, right? And they're going to kill Josephus. Only he says, hold up, I'm a prophet. And they're like, well, so? And he's like, don't you want to have a prophet around? You don't want to, it's not good to kill a prophet. And he said, in fact, and he said, Vespasian is going to be the next emperor, and Titus is going to follow him as emperor after that. He made his prophecy. Well, Vespasian's like, hey, it's good to have a prophet in your hip pocket, right? So instead of killing him, he says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you a historian of this time period. I'm going to bring you eventually back to Rome, put you up in a house and let you write history books, which is the reason that we know everything about this, because Josephus' histories have told us all these stories. Well, as it goes, the battle went on. Vespasian did become emperor. He was the very next emperor. And the first thing he did was have Titus get another legion of soldiers and march on Jerusalem, which Jerusalem fell in 70 AD. It was the most horrific devastation of the Jews up until that time, only to be exceeded by the Holocaust of the 20th century. Josephus says that so many people were crucified in Jerusalem, they ran out of wood. That crosses actually lined the streets of Jerusalem, of the Jews that they killed. But a group of them fled here to Masada, right? And were here and actually held out from something like 70 to roughly 73 AD. They held out here. The Roman encampments are over there, and this is the way, because there was no way the Romans could take them from here, so they built up a ramp over on that side to come this way. Well, in 73, they were led by a guy named Eleazar ben Yair, or something like that. And they made a pact, the whole community that lived here, that it would be better to die than to be in slavery, because the Jews had submitted to so much of that in the past. So they made that pact. So what they did was, Eleazar gave this big speech, which part of which is in this little brochure, in which he said, let us burn all of our money, destroy everything we've got here, leave only our provisions so that it's proof that we didn't give up because we ran out of food. Right? So they left all their food and everything, and what they did was 10 men were chosen here, and they killed everybody else. And then of the 10, one man killed the other 9, and then he took his own life. So that when the Romans broke the wall in something like April of 73 or so AD, everybody was dead. Except they had no, and everything was gone. Things were burned except the food provisions to prove that they weren't defeated because they ran out of food and water. Now the reason, you're probably asking, how do we know all this? The reason we know this is because the story goes, 2 women took their children and they hid in a well while the killing was going on. And when the Romans came in, they were alive, and they told the story, and Josephus wrote the story from his comfort in Rome later on. And the moral of that story is it's handy to be a prophet, among other things. But no, seriously, the reason this is a big deal, this whole location, because a lot of people died here. And for those of you who don't know, some people think that in 1 Samuel, where it talks about David went to the stronghold, it doesn't say doesn't give it a name, it just calls it the stronghold, that actually it was Masada before Herod built this up. The walls you see and everything were built by Herod, the first one, not the, there were 4 Herods. But the first Herod, Herod the Great, was the one that built the walls here. But there was a natural sort of fortress and stronghold, and David, quite possibly, we don't know for sure, but quite possibly himself, walked where we're walking